once again, coming from Franklin, Tennessee. We heard a couple great lessons in the past 2 days, and we're looking forward to hearing another one.
Thanks, sir. So I have taken the liberty to actually flip-flop my lessons. I hope that does not offend anybody, but I felt like the one on social media would probably be a little bit better adapted for a Bible class. And Psalm 23, we're going to say that for worship. If you've got your Bible, go ahead and open it up to Matthew chapter 16, verse 24. Matthew 16, verse 24 says, "Then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." Jesus talking to folks back during that time, using that expression, take up your cross, would have been a way of saying, be prepared to die for me. Because they recognized during the first century, taking up your cross meant you were going to be executed in a really horrible fashion. As you look at his words, as you think about that passage, I want you to ask yourself, who are your children and your grandchildren truly following? Jesus says, follow me, but the reality is many young people today are choosing to follow their friends, follow their classmates. And so we're going to spend some time talking a little bit about media, about social media. And I realize I got all ages in this room. Some of you are very, very active on social media. Some of you don't know what it is. And that's okay, because this actual lesson is going to hit some Bible fundamentals that are going to apply to all ages. As we get started, I want you to consider for just a moment all of the media that you are plugged into. From the time you wake up to the time you lay your head down at night. Most people don't realize or think about the songs, the emails, the phone, the streaming, all the different things that you are taking in. And then ask yourself, how much of that is from a secular worldview? Remember, Jesus said one of the greatest commands, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul. What was the third one? All your mind and strength, with mind. We got to remember it's important what we're putting into our mind. Some of you are probably very familiar with what's going on, the recent controversy on Friday night with the opening of the Olympics. Why is that a big deal? Well, think with me for just a moment. You've got quite literally millions of people who are watching the opening ceremonies, and this is something that's going to leave a lasting image right up here that some people are going to say that's okay. Some people are going to say absolutely not. You got TikTok that is celebrating the LGBT community. In fact, one of the things that some of you may not be aware of, because of some of these social media venues like TikTok, it is actually increasing the amount of plastic surgery because young people are wanting to fit into that mold. And so we got to ask ourselves, how does all of this media affect our relationship with God? A couple of quick studies for you to think about very quickly. As of March 2017, the Center for Research Media said that folks who use social media frequently are suffering from feelings of social isolation. Now, why is that an interesting tidbit? This is called social media, right? We're connecting with each other, and yet it actually makes us feel what? More isolated. Not just that, folks that are using it are showing higher depression, more anxiety. Oh, and by the way, suicide continues to trend upward in young people who are using lots and lots of social media. I'm not going to read this entire quote, but I want you to look at the bottom portion. It says, too many of them see their lives as a series of flickering photos or quick videos. They need constant doses of admiration and constant confirmation of their tenuous existence, which come in the form of Facebook likes and Twitter retweets. So you got a generation of folks who their self-esteem is basically being either built up or tore down according to how much somebody is commenting, how much somebody is liking. So we are the most connected society in the world, and yet we're the most isolated, depressed, and suicide is on the rise. Take a look at 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 32. This will kind of help you understand why we're even addressing this. 1 Chronicles 12:32 says, of the sons of Issachar who had understanding of the times to know what Israel ought to do. Should we, as Christian parents, as Christian grandparents, have an understanding of the times and to be able to communicate and give our children a healthy response to what's going on? Absolutely. Is social media a very real form of the way they communicate today? Absolutely. Is it affecting the world? Oh, yeah. Some of you in this room probably didn't know what a social influencer is when you were young, and yet today we have them. It's affecting the world, but it's also affecting our children in the church. And so it's definitely something that we need to be talking about. Back to Matthew 16, verse 24. If we're going to get our children to follow him, the first and the foremost lesson of this whole deal is Jesus and God have to come first in their life, period. If social media is coming in between them and their relationship to God, we got to understand it cannot replace what their true first love should be. Now, I know a lot of you think I'm going to get up here in this lesson and shake my finger and say, oh, social media is all bad. And I want to make sure you hear me say loud and clear, it's not all bad. There are actually a lot of good things when it comes to technology, social media. For instance, I've got a lot of friends who are using it to evangelize or to reach out or to teach folks. They're posting verses, they're posting inspirational thoughts, they're posting articles that deal with real life situations. And what I hope you guys are starting to realize and think about is, in modern culture, social media is basically like the new foyer of a church. And what I mean by that is, a lot of folks are going to check out your web page, they're going to check out your Facebook page before they ever enter a building like this. And door knocking, it's like door knocking without the actual door knocking. Why do I say that? Well, because a lot of times it's the very first and the very last thing that somebody is doing when they wake up, right before they go to sleep. And so we can use it for good. You can put Bible verses out there. You can put Bible studies out there. You can also introduce them to your church. You can show live stream video, these kinds of things. So I don't want you to leave here thinking, oh, social media equals bad. I don't think that's the case. I will, as a parent, kind of preface that by saying I think there are some platforms of social media that are bad. And my children, they don't use them. They're not allowed to use them in my house while I'm paying the cell phone bill. But I don't think all social media is bad. I do know that it can be used for bad. And so I kind of want us to hone in on that. Very first thing I want us to do is remind ourselves what our job truly is. And that's whether we live in the year 224 AD and there is no electricity, or whether we live in 2024, we have the same primary job. And that is to make sure our children, our grandchildren have a fidelity to Almighty God and that we're passing on a legacy of faith. So, no matter what year you live in, some of you in this room remember back to Ataris and Commodore 64s. Some of you lived a little bit even before that. Our goal, though, has not changed. Somebody says, wait, but what about teaching them about money or marriage or education or sports, or you need to teach them good manners? To which I would point out, nothing at all should ever come before teaching them a fidelity to God. And so whether I'm talking to you this morning about social media, whether I'm talking to you about abortion, whether I'm talking to you about the LGBTQ, whatever ABC movement, nothing comes before teaching them a love and allegiance to God. That should be number one. Anything that comes between you and job one should be eradicated from your home. So if your children are starting to show some signs that they're becoming addicted, you got to be a parent and step in. I had two very loving Christian parents in my home congregation come to our coffee shop about 4 weeks ago, and they were having a husband and wife discussion. They'd been there for a couple of hours. Finally, they came into my office, they grabbed me, they said, do you have 15 minutes to talk to us? I was like, sure, yeah. I sat down, they looked at me, they have two boys. One is about 16, one is about 14. They said, we feel like our kids are kind of like just, all they're ever wanting to do is play video games. That's all they do. I joked with them, I said, well, I think you're probably right, because that's all they ever talk about. And every time they post a Be Real picture, it's in front of a video game. And so what should we do? So take it away. Their eyes got real big and they said, if we do that, they're going to absolutely throw a fit. I said, yep, and that proves to me that they have an addiction to that video game. They're getting a dopamine hit from that video game. You've got to be the parent. Now, and the bottom line is, sermons on social media, they don't matter a whole lot if your child has an allegiance to that video game or that social media. You got to change that. You got to fix it. Now, I know that in modern times, they teach preachers, hey, you need to have 3 points. Three-point lesson. I got about 20. So you guys just kind of buckle in, get ready. We're going to look at some lessons that I would strongly encourage you to think about. Lesson number 1, be careful, social media is addicting. Think about how many of you in this room have meant to just jump on the internet for just a minute. Like maybe you were just going to check your email or do something, and you realize you got 3 Facebook messages. So what do? You check them. And while you check them, you notice that there's a post from a blog that's being advertised. It's a blog that you like to go to. Maybe it's a conservative blog, and he's talking about something that was in the news recently. So you go to that blog, you read it, and you're like, man, this is good stuff. This is so good. You want to put it out, and so what do? You tweet it out, or maybe you put it on your Facebook. But you notice over on the right-hand side, there's one of those little ads that pops up, a little ad that says, what Disney prince or princess are you? And you got to know, right? So you click it. Turns out I'm Prince Charming. You realize you haven't seen that since you were little. So you click on Netflix, you realize how much time you just wasted thinking you were just going to be on there for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. It is definitely very, very addicting, and I think the problem is actually much bigger than most people believe. This is from a study that was done. Social networks massively addictive. Most people I know check on and interact on social sites constantly throughout the day. They have no idea how much actual time they're spending on social media. Now, as you think about that, line it up, harmonize it with God's word that tells us, I beg you as sojourners, pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. So, as a Christian, one of the things that we must do, whether we're 17 or 117, is we've got to constantly be asking ourselves, how is this affecting me? How much time am I spending on it? And what is happening to my mind living with this constant distraction? Because it does affect you. Lesson number 2. While we're talking about time, is this the best use of my time? As a Christian, I've only been given a certain amount of years, days in my life. And I'm supposed to be a good steward with those. Now that I'm a Christ follower, now that I've picked up my cross, I've chosen to follow him, how I use my time really matters. We've got to understand that spending hours just scrolling on videos, we're going to have to give an account for that one day. Everybody in here very familiar probably with James chapter 4, verse 14. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. So when it comes to time, here's some Brad Harrub encouragements to everybody in this room. Number 1, set a limit. Stick to it. Parents in this room, you can actually put a limit on your child's phone. And my children have one. And my children are occasionally coming to me going, hey, Dad, you know you set a 2-hour limit on my phone for XYZ? Well, you know, the other day when I was working for you and I had to use Square app and I had it open, it used up all my time. To which I either decide, okay, am I going to give them a little bit more time, or am I going to look at them and say, that's real life? Number 2, guard what time you pick. Be very careful about the time that you decide to be on social media. And what I mean by that is, limit yourself and stick to a time that is not going to interfere with family, that maybe you should be doing something else. Number 3, have media fast. I tell this to parents all the time. You want to know if your kid's addicted? Take their phone away from them for 2 days. Watch what happens. You know, if they start throwing a fit, twitching, that's probably a sign that they got a little bit of a problem. Number 3, walk in the Spirit, not in the flesh. We teach this, we preach this, we talk about it all the time. But think about when it comes to our devices, our social media, our media entertainment, almost 100% in the flesh. And yet the Bible is saying, don't do that. Galatians chapter 5, verse 16, I say then walk in the Spirit, you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. These are contrary to one another, so that you do not do the things that you wish. If we're honest with ourselves, a lot of times social media enlivens our carnal nature. You know, we enjoy that quick satisfaction. It is an outlet that is feeding our brain. I mean, because after all, complaints need to be heard. You need to express your opinion. Any kind of contrary views, you got to squash them. And yet, that's very much living in the flesh. I think everybody in here recognizes social media is filled with emotion. It is filled with reactions. And it is very, very easy to get caught up in that swift-moving current. As Christians, we've got to fight against being in the world like that. Romans chapter 8, verse 8 says, "So then those who are in the flesh cannot please God." What are the works of the flesh? Take a look. Galatians chapter 5, starting in verse 19. And as you look at that list, let me remind old and young alike, a lot of this stuff you're seeing on the screen behind me is stuff that is in television shows. It's in the movies you're streaming. It's in social media. And it's in stuff we really don't need to be putting right up here. Lesson number 4. Do not miss out on the joy of face-to-face contact. I think this is a big one that sometimes we overlook. John wrote this in 2 John chapter 1, verse 12. He said, "Having many things to write to you, I did not wish to do so with paper and ink, but I hope to come to you and speak face to face, that our joy may be full." And you get this same feeling a lot with Paul in his letters where he's talking about, I'm anxious to come and be with you. I want to see you. Letters are good, and there's a place and time for them. There's also this right here. And one of the reasons why it is so important, I know this has not happened in this congregation at all, but occasionally in other places, maybe between husband and wife, sometimes communication is not real good. I know it doesn't happen here, but sometimes husbands and wives, they don't communicate real good. And sometimes somebody means something and it's taken a different way. Well, guess what? A lot of times ladies are reading your body language, guys. And I learned that, like, when I send my wife a text, if I have the caps lock on by accident, apparently that means something to her. She thinks I'm yelling at her. Face-to-face conversation. By the way, if you've got younger children, grandchildren, please, please, please help them learn to have a conversation with adults, because that's a lost art. We used to actually, and I'm admitting something here I probably shouldn't admit, we used to pay our kids $2, $5. We'd get in a car after a weekend seminar, and I would say, "Did you meet so-and-so?" Maybe the elder, maybe a preacher. They say, "Yeah." There's $5 if you can tell me what color their eyes were. Guess what? My kids learned to look people in the eyes primarily because they wanted that $5 or they wanted to go get ice cream. We need to get back to face-to-face conversation. Lesson number 5, look people in the eyes when they are with you. You want to talk about something that is showing that somebody doesn't really mean something to you? What do you think about when you are with somebody and they're constantly looking at a phone? What is that really communicating? This is more important than this. I see it all the time with husbands and wives. I see it with parents and children. I've actually sat in a restaurant by myself eating, watching a family of 4 literally never say a word to each other. They all had a device. Ultimately, what that's telling other folks is, you're not really important to me. This is more important to me. Now let's take that and let's apply that to this. Can anybody in this room imagine Jesus delivering the Sermon on the Mount and him kind of going, "Blessed are," hold on just a second. That sermon would lose a little bit of its effectiveness, wouldn't it? Lesson number 6, use social media to encourage and not discourage. Is it a true statement that we already get quite a bit of discouragement in the news and in the media today. Is that a true statement? I mean, between wars, between all the different bad stuff that's out there, we got a lot of just doom and gloom. We should be the ones who are encouraging, who are being a light, who are being a city on the hill. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 says this, let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works. So I'm going to make an admission to you. Again, I don't like to make. I had a game on my phone. It was an innocent game. There was no money involved. It was a card game called Spades. Those of you who like spades, I'll play you later. Love it. Love the game. Love to think through it. I was playing online. Didn't realize how much time I was wasting on that app. Until one day I hit a little button called screen time and I was like, oh wow. I ended up deciding that's got to go. So I took it off. It's still off my phone. You won't find it. But I made the conscious decision. I thought, every time that I would normally just aimlessly grab my phone, play around with two of spades, I'm going to contact somebody in my home congregation. I'm going to send them a text. Maybe it's the person who led singing Wednesday night, or maybe it's the person who gave the short devotional. Maybe it's somebody who's been sick or somebody who lost a loved one a few weeks or months ago. I'm going to use the time that I would have spent aimlessly playing that game. And I'll tell you something, it's changed my life and my relationship with my church family. Isaiah chapter 50 verse 4 says this, the Lord has given me the tongue of the learned that I should know how to speak a word in season to him who is weary. Lesson number 7. They aren't real friends. Now, I know that there are some of you in this room that right now you're thinking, man, I got several thousand friends because you hit the confirm button. Well, guess what? Clicking confirm does not mean that they are friends. One of the dangers of this mentality is our kids are growing up in a time in which they think their importance is how many friends they got on social media or how many likes they're getting. We got to make sure that we do not allow these virtual friends to control our thoughts, our attitudes. Folks, if you realize every time you're picking up that device, it's raising your blood pressure, getting your heart going, it's time to turn it off, okay? It is time to kind of reset yourself. When you're thinking about, are these really my friends? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at the words of this song and ask yourself, is that really, are these the same kind of people like Jesus? John chapter 15 verse 13 says, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. The right kind of friend is somebody who's going to want to make you a better Christian. They're going to sharpen iron. Now, here's the thing. There may be some of those that are online and that you do interact with, and that's great. But please do not make your friend network just that group of virtual people. Real friends are going to invest time and energy into you. They're going to listen, share common interests. Here's a big one. They're going to tell you the truth. Even if it hurts. Because sometimes we need somebody to say, you know what, that was kind of dumb. Real friends are going to protect us. They're going to overlook our faults. They're going to help bear our burdens. And they're going to be loyal. It's interesting to me, we're more connected than ever, and yet research shows we actually have less friendships than in previous decades. I don't know that you can truly nurture real friendships if you're spending hours and hours online. Lesson number 8, avoid bragging. Everybody in this room, if you were invited to somebody's house And all that person did the whole time you were there is tell you how good they were, show you their trophies, tell you how wonderful. It would drive you crazy. You would not want to be around that person. And yet, sometimes that's what we do on social media. We got to make sure that our social media doesn't become just an opportunity to brag and to promote ourselves. Proverbs chapter 27 verse 2 says this, "Let another man praise you and not your own mouth, a stranger and not your own lips." You say, well, how do I know if I'm bragging? Well, if every single one of your posts is about yourself, pretty good chance you're probably bragging. I have 2 phenomenal grandkids. And if you want to see pictures, I got them, okay? I try very hard to not post things all the time, even though I'd love to, because I think y'all all want to see them. But I also realize if that's all I'm putting out there, that's really kind of focusing my whole world on just me, my grandchildren, or my children. So I've got to make sure that I'm not just constantly bragging about myself, my kids. Matthew chapter 6, verse 1, "Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men, to be seen by them, otherwise you'll have no reward from your Father in heaven." So we got to make sure that whatever we post, whether we're talking about our children, whether we're talking about maybe service opportunities we did with the church, that we're doing it with a humble spirit. We're doing it to glorify God and not to give ourselves praise. And that ultimately, everything that we're doing is for Him. Lesson number 9, and this is a big one. Watch out for envy and discontentment. How many times have you opened social media, you look at all these pictures, and you think to yourself, wow, their lives are great. You see that family on the beach, and they got the white shirts and the matching denim, and you're like, oh, what you don't see are the 70,000 other pictures it took to get that one, where they've got sand fleas biting them, and kids over here screaming, and sun beating down on them, and they're miserable. You don't see any of that. What you see is that one beautiful picture, and you think, oh man, I wish my family was like that. Folks, be very, very careful. Solomon wrote, "He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This is also vanity." Philippians chapter 4, verse 11. "Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned, whatever state I'm in, to be content." So, if you find yourself at home, and you've got a mound of dirty clothes this tall, and you look at social media, and somebody is enjoying a trip to Italy, and you're thinking, I'm stuck under my husband's dirty socks, and they're in Italy. Please remember, they're going to have to go home from Italy, and there's going to be a mountain of dirty clothes to unpack for them too. Learn to be content. If social media is tempting you towards discontentment, then the way to glorify God is to ultimately repent and to get off that computer, that phone. I'll remind you that Paul said covetousness is idolatry. Lesson 10, don't allow Facebook, Twitter, Instagram to stifle your prayer. A lot of people have substituted the time they would be studying their Bible, they would be praying, for time on a phone. And we need to still understand we need that time in prayer. We need that time in His Word. Psalm 46, verse 10, "Be still and know that He is God." I've said it, so I'm not going to dwell anymore on it, but ultimately, social media can eat up a whole lot of your free time that you would normally spend with God. Lesson 11, conduct yourself on social media like you would in person. It blows my mind what people will say behind a keyboard and a screen they would never say in person. Think before you hit that like button or that share button, because ultimately you're a representative of Jesus Christ. I've seen grandparents who hit the like button on a granddaughter who is wearing a skirt. And you guys know what a skirt, it would be called a skirt, but there's not enough material. It's just a skirt. You can like your granddaughter, but don't like her in immodest clothes. Ultimately, be the person that you are, whether you're in front of a screen or behind a screen. We don't need to be hiding. Lesson 12. Don't allow Facebook to blind you to false beauty. Again, this kind of goes back to what I was saying with the whole, they put the best pictures out there. But understand, this is one of those things where, especially with young ladies, if all you're seeing on Instagram is all these folks who look wonderful, they look great all the time, then you're going to be tempted to be pulled into that and to think, wow, my physical beauty is really where it's all about, and I need to work on that and buy the right clothes and do my hair. The Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or his physical stature, because I've refused him. The Lord does not see as man sees, for man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Lesson 13, be careful what you allow into your mind. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because we've already talked about what is the greatest command. We got to be careful about what we're allowing into our mind. Parents, you need to think about what you're allowing into the hearts and the minds of your children. And as you do that, reflect on what Paul said about whatever things are true, noble, just, pure, lovely, of good report, if there any virtue, anything praiseworthy, that's what we need to be putting right up here. It does stick with you, folks. Those of you in this room who maybe you watched slasher films when you were a teenager, maybe you read some books that had graphic stuff, guess what? This old brain that God created, it can retain that stuff. Think on good things. Lesson 14. Be careful of lies, what you see. If I were to ask you, what do you think is the average age of first-time viewing pornography? The average age? 8. And that's if they don't have older siblings or cousins who are close to them. And so we've got to make sure, as I'm looking out in this room, aside from about 6 of you, if you wanted pornography when you were little, you had to go to a store, it was kept behind the counter, they put it in a brown bag, and you had to walk of shame to your car, and that was ugliness. Today, one click away. And so we've got to make sure that we are training up our children to be able to ultimately abstain from all sexual immorality. Hopefully I don't have to say this, but don't send, receive images that are not glorifying to God. I know that when you were 16, you thought you loved that boy and he needed a picture of you and that he would never share it until you broke up. Lesson 15, use social media to reach the lost. Again, not going to spend a lot of time on this because we've already talked about it being kind of the foyer of your church building. But we should be evangelizing because that's where a lot of folks are. You'd be surprised how many people are on YouTube, how many people are daily checking Instagram. And so use those things as a way to reach out to people. Encourage them through your posts, set up Bible studies online, talk to family members through social media, use Bible reading apps on your phone. All of these things that you see on the screen behind me are things that you can do to help evangelize and grow the kingdom. Lesson 16, be careful what you idolize. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 14 says, therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. Exodus 20 verse 3 says, you shall have no other gods before me. There's a a lot of folks who they're tempted to basically idolize social media. And we got to make sure that we are not in that group. Colossians chapter 3, verse 17, whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. I'm going to leave you with this thought. I know I went through those last few really quickly. It has been said there are 5 Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. What's the 5th one? See if I can get my computer to go click. What do you guys think would be the 5th Gospel? It's your life. Because there's a lot of people in this county, in this community, who aren't going to read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And the only gospel that they're ever going to actually get is from you. And that may be on a screen, that may be in person, that may be in a variety of ways, but we need to make sure that in every aspect of our life, whether it's through media, whether it's through social media, whether it's in person, that we are living and speaking a life that ultimately is going to bring people closer to Jesus Christ. Thanks very, very much for your attention. We'll get ready for worship together.
Amen.